In the next 60 minutes, history will repeat itself as we look back to a season that saw Amos Alonzo Stagg's all-time coaching record surpassed. Paul Bear Bryant, 315. This is the famous tower on the sidelines of the University of Alabama practice field. The vantage point from which Paul W. Bear Bryant decides how well the drill is going for the day. Nobody knows how many times Bryant has climbed it, how many thousands of steps he has mounted to the top. But everyone knows these steps have taken him to the pinnacle of success in the world of college football. But now he stands alone, this guiding genius behind the Crimson Tide, the man who has broken the record set by the immortal Amos Alonzo Stagg for most career victories. At 314, he tied Stagg. And on November 28, 1981, against Auburn, he set the new mark of 315. Early in the season, he said, well, if someone has to be the winningest coach of all time, it might as well be me. And yes, why not? Hi, I'm Howard David in Mizlou Network Control. This is our 20th anniversary year on the Mizlou Television Network. And during the course of this year, one of the big highlights is paying tribute to not only one of the greatest coaches in the history of college football, but certainly one of the great Americans, Paul W. Bear Bryant. Of course, Joe Willie Namath played a big part in the success of Paul W. Bear Bryant. And Joe, I imagine that road to 315 must have been incredible.
Oh, Howard, and what a road it was. You know, it was a road marked by many mileposts, and incredible action, high drama, and certainly deep emotion. All a part, of course, of the colorful tapestry that is college football. I am certainly delighted to be your co-host tonight along with Howard as we go back over the years to show you a legend in the making. First, let's get some of the numbers out of the way, some of the facts and figures behind that magic number of 315. Coach Bear Bryant put in 37 years as a head coach, 37, at Maryland, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Alabama. But it was at Alabama where he established his fame for all time. You see, it was there that by the time he had broken Amos Alonzo Stagg's record, he had won 224 games, lost just 41, and tied 9. He had been Southeastern Conference Coach of the Year 7 times, National Coach of the Year 3 times, and Coach Brown had won 13 conference titles, 6 national championships. Coach Brown had produced 51 All-Americans, and 44 of his players or assistants are or were head coaches in college or pro football.
There is much more to the Bear Bryant story, but did someone mention Amos Alonzo Stagg? Then it's only fitting that we take time out for a moment and pay tribute to the man known as the grand old man of football. As a divinity student of Yale, Stagg was an end on the first All-America team in 1888. He began his coaching career at Springfield College, but was lured away in 1892 to become the first coach at the University of Chicago. For most of his 41 years there, he had phenomenal success, turning out numerous Big Ten champions and All-America players. And then when Chicago de-emphasized football, his material dried up. But he had left a lasting impact on the sport. Newt Rockne of Notre Dame put it flatly: all modern football comes from Stagg. And it sure did. Stagg merely invented the T-formation, the flanker, the man in motion, the quick kick, cross-blocking, and was the first to number players' jerseys for spectator benefit. In 1905, when President Teddy Roosevelt threatened to ban football as a brutal killing sport, it was Stagg's influence which saved the sport by banning the flying wedge and opening up the game with the forward pass. After retirement at Chicago in 1933, Stagg became head coach for 14 years at the College of Pacific in California, where he built his victory string to 314. Amos Alonzo Stagg, a pure idealist who lived till 102 years of age, once said, "Winning isn't worthwhile unless one has something finer and nobler behind it."
Fittingly enough, the man who broke Stagg's record pretty much feels that same way. That man, Paul William Bryant, began his road to football fame in a place called Morrow Bottom, Arkansas, near the town of Fordyce, Arkansas. Now, Coach Bryant's parents, they were hard-working, poor tenant farmers, and it was a tough life for young Paul and his 10 brothers and sisters. Later, Coach Bryant would say that he knew he'd have to be a coaching success for fear of going back to chopping cotton or trailing a mule behind a plow.
Fordyce was a typical small town in Arkansas, which young Paul hated to visit because of his shabby clothes and his station in life. But there was a way out. He was a big, strong kid. And at 14, he played in the first football game he ever saw, after he had the local cobbler nail some cleats onto the only pair of shoes he owned.
One day a carnival came to town, and the promoter offered $1 a minute for anyone who could wrestle a bear he had. Well, young Paul found himself hustled up on stage by his friends and into a tussle with that bear. Well, of course, the bear won in short order, very short order. But the bloodied youngster immediately got himself a nickname for life. For 3 years, Bear Bryant was an offensive end and defensive tackle. When he was a senior, somebody from the University of Alabama came by and offered him a scholarship. At Alabama, Bryant was a 3-year starter and gained fame as the other end opposite Hall of Famer Don Hudson. Now, the Tide whipped Stanford in the Rose Bowl in Bear's senior year, and he had a great game.
The young Bryant then took a job as an assistant coach at Alabama for 4 years under famed Frank Thomas. He moved on to an assistantship at Vanderbilt for 2 more years and then felt he was ready for the brass ring. He was offered the head coaching spot at Arkansas, his home state, but he was never to fill the job. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor took care of that as Paul Bryant immediately enlisted in the Navy as a lieutenant. 4 years of World War II found Bryant in a variety of posts, including a stint in North Africa. Then came a transfer to North Carolina Pre-Flight School, where Bryant coached the pre-flighters football team with huge success. With the war ending in the summer of 1945, he was offered the job as head coach at Maryland.
Coach Bryant took that job just 5 days before practice started. But Bear Bryant had the good sense to take a lot of his Carolina Flight School stars with him, gaining them instant eligibility. Well, at Maryland, Coach Bryant turned their program around to a successful one in just 1 year. But he didn't stay there. Curly Bird, the president of the university, reinstated a player whom Bryant had fired for disciplinary reasons. And Bear wasn't going to have anyone, even the school president, tell him how to handle any part of his football program.
Kentucky, the doormat of the Southeast Conference, was looking for a coach, and Bear Bryant answered a telegram that had come to him at random. Would he like the job? He would indeed. And in 1946, he began the task of turning Kentucky into a major power. In 8 years, Bryant posted a mark of 60, 23, and 5. He gave Kentucky its only conference crown in its history and took the Wildcats to 4 bowl games. Meanwhile, producing such stars as Babe Parilli, Bob Gain, and Steve Meilinger. But there was the bitter with the sweet. Adolph Rupp's Kentucky basketball teams were the pride of the state and dominated the entire Kentucky sports scene. Bear Bryant hated the fact that football had to play second fiddle to basketball. The year he led the Wildcats to the conference title, he received a gold watch from Kentucky boosters. But Rupp received a Cadillac.
Bear Bryant knew it was time to move on. In 1954, he took the head coaching job at Texas A&M, knowing that, well, he'd be dealing with another doormat program in the Southwest Conference. His first year was noted for 2 things: a disastrous 1-9 record and the infamous episode at Junction, Texas. In a scrubby, hot, cactus-ridden boot camp outpost far from the campus, Coach Bryant took about 65 players or so for his style of indoctrination. Only 29 players returned to the campus.
Coach Bryant believed he had molded the kind of character he knew it would take to win that conference. The next few years saw the Aggies as a national power and rated #1 in the polls. And in John David Crow, Bryant had his first and only Heisman Trophy winner. Late in the 1958 season, there were charges of recruiting violations over which Bryant had no control. But Bryant already had been contacted by Alabama.
And now began Operation Turnaround. The years just before Bear Bryant came home had produced the lowest ebb in Tide football history, losing seasons year after year, One of them a horrendous 0-11 record. An Alabama football season without a single victory. That's unthinkable. The depths had been reached. Coach Bryant tells Mizlou reporter Mike Hogwood why he decided to return to Alabama.
Well, the thing that made the biggest impression on me of anything was I started getting letters from 8- and 9-year-old children, 10-year-olds. Said if I come to Alabama, they want to play for me. And 14, 15. I had lots of mail from children. And I think that had the biggest impact on me than anything, and a lot of them played for me.
The still young but maturing Bear Bryant dedicated himself to a new era of Alabama football, and that's what Alabama fans got. In the next 24 years, there would never be another losing season. Bryant drove his first Bama team to a 5-4-1 campaign with the same material that had won only 2 games the previous year. 3 years later, the nation hailed Alabama as national champion, its first since the start of the polls. And everyone had a feeling that a dynasty was being fashioned by the craggy-faced, gravel-voiced coach in Tuscaloosa. The honors and accolades began piling up. There would be additional national championships in 1954, 65, 73, 78, and 1979. All-America players would blossom virtually every year, sometimes 2 and 3 a year. Names that would surely be destined for future enshrinement in the Hall of Fame. There was Leroy Jordan, and Steve Sloan, Ray Perkins, and Kenny Stabler, Johnny Musso, John Hanna, Richard Todd, and many more, including one named Joe Willie Namath.
In 1971, when Bear Bryant marked his 200th victory against Southern California, nobody paid much attention. But by the time he had won his 250th game in 1975 against LSU, well, the dramatic concept started to emerge. This slow-moving man with the fierce inner fire might someday break Amos Alonzo Spagg's record of 314 victories.
As Bryant and his Alabama teams collected their honors over the years, it also became obvious that there were many reasons for his success. His abilities as a teacher, his way of attracting and molding great assistant coaches, his tremendous talent as a recruiter, and his knack of dealing effectively with his players on a personal basis. The football players gave Bryant their best, and he gave them the best in magnificent Bryant Hall, a very special dormitory for football players. And soon the man in the famous houndstooth hat was more than a football coach. He was growing into legendary status, a dynamic hero figure in the state of Alabama who had turned Crimson Tide football almost into a religion. His was the most recognized face on television, the man that many people wanted to run for governor or senator. But all Bear Bryant wanted to do was enjoy his family and coach Alabama teams and see his players become successful in life after football.
A moment now with one of my favorite people, Jim Goosetree, the head trainer at the University of Alabama. He's known Coach Bryant from the first day there. Say, Goose, tell us, what was it like the first day you met Coach Bryant?
Back in 1957, I had arrived here 3 months before Coach Bryant came, and when he was hired, I was a little apprehensive about whether or not I might be retained, and as it turned out, one day in January after a basketball trip, he and I passed in the hall, and I said, "Coach, I need to talk with you." He said, "Oh, yeah, I've been wanting to talk with you too, Jim. Come on down to the office." And we went in his office that it had remodeled. Actually, 6 assistants had resided in that area, and he fixed it up into a conference room and into his office. And at that time, I thought, well, we're going to have a nice long chat, so I trailed him down the hall, and he walked into his office, sat down on the conference table, wheeled around, and looked me straight in the eye, and still, even sitting on the table, he towered over me and said, "Jim, I know more about you than you know about me." He said, "If I like you and you like me, after spring practice, you've got a job at Alabama as long as you want one." And for some reason or other, I just reacted and blurted out. I said, "Coach, I've already got 50% of that whipped." I better get out of here and go to work on the other half. So actually, that was our start. And, of course, later on in June, as contract time came, he and I had a verbal agreement, and actually over the years, 25 years to be exact, I've never had a written contract with the University of Alabama or Coach Bryant, and he's certainly been awfully good to me, and you know how we feel about each other.
Coach, tell us, did the 1981 season have any extra pressure, more so than the others?
You know what pressure is, Joe. You've been in it now, on stage, on the field, in the collegiate and professional football ranks, and really this year has really been an exceptional one, that so many goals have been reached and so many others have been strived for. The pressure was accepted by Coach Bryant right from the start. He's tried to keep the staff and the personnel on the football team from feeling any pressure of the goals that people have set for him, other than our only goal to win the national championship. Hopefully, many of us, I feel sure, and in my case, I've self-imposed pressure on myself, and I would have to say that probably it has been a little different, because we all have felt the real desire and real need to help him reach goals that people have set for him and that he set for himself.
We're back in Mizlou Network control as we're paying tribute to the great head football coach of the University of Alabama, Paul Bear Bryant. The Tide wins the national championship in 1961, and Joe, you have to succeed Pat Trammell as the #1 quarterback. Were there any skeptics that really had doubts in their minds as to whether or not you could make it as the #1 quarterback?
Well, yes, there were a lot. First of all, no one could have ever filled Pat's shoes. To start with, Pat Trammell was a great player and a great team leader, and he was one of the major reasons that Alabama won a national championship. People expected some good things from me, for sure, but there was really no way to tell until we started playing the games.
Many people, as a matter of fact, most people probably don't realize that sometime in your career at Alabama, you were a running back. You came to Alabama as a signal caller, but you become a running back, and you have your first injury.
Yeah, well, I was running the football. Our quarterbacks ran the ball a lot. I really didn't play in the running back position. Played some defensive back there from time to time, but not often either. But we ran the ball a lot. I was a good runner, and I did injure my knee the first time running the football. No one laid a hand on me. I was running around right in on a run-pass option, and I planted to cut back, and I tore some ligaments in my knee. Fortunately, we had a fellow named Steve Sloan that was also a quarterback on our team, and he filled right in, and we went on to win the championship.
Bear switches his offense away from the split T to a more pass-oriented offense, which had to make you feel more comfortable.
One of the great things about Coach Bryant, and there are several for sure, is that he does adjust his football style according to the individuals that he has to perform. He doesn't try to force his players to play a game that they physically or mentally can't handle. And he saw that I could throw the football from a drop-back style, so he put in the drop-back pass for us. Steve Sloan could throw it with a drop-back. Kenny Stabler could throw it. Scott Hunter. Prior to that, Pat Trammell was basically a roll-out, run-pass option guy. One of Coach Bryant's strong point, again, is being able to adjust his football tactics to his working personnel.
Things didn't always come up roses for you, though, at Alabama. I mean, there was a time when the Bears set you down and you were suspended from the football team.
Yes, and it was a really tough time. One of the toughest things I ever went through. He, of course, was right. I broke a training rule. And when you break a training rule, you're letting the whole team down. You have to learn that you're working in a team situation with a group of people that they're depending on you. You know, you can't go break the rules. And I fouled up, so he did suspend me. It was a tough time. He told me that he'd let me come back out in spring training if I maintained decent grades and stayed in school. And he let me come back out. I was a fifth-string quarterback when we started the spring, but I worked my way up, and in the spring game I did well, so I was back on the team.
That was in 1964. The Tide wins a national championship that year and goes on to a bowl game that had to be the highlight of your career, winning the national crown.
That was it. That was the second highlight of my career. The most important thing to me was being elected a captain at the University of Alabama by my teammates. That is in college ball, high school ball, professional football, whatever. When your teammates point at a couple of guys and say, you guys are our leaders, we respect what you're doing. That's the highlight. That's number one.
If there's anything you can remember more vividly than any other fact of your career at Alabama and playing for Paul Bryant, what's the one thing that you came away from Alabama with in a remembrance of the Bear?
A great feeling of camaraderie. The players all loved Coach Bryant. All. There were a few that didn't disagree or disagreed with some of the methods, basic understanding that we all learned to understand. So there are a few people that probably don't feel great about it. But his players get a camaraderie together, starting with him. We all love him because he loves his players. He tries to get them to do the best, and if they do, he treats them the best. You know, he wants the best for his people, but they have to do the best for themselves and for their families and for their team.
Thanks, Joe. Now for another view of this great coach. Let's go to Dwayne Dow in Chicago, along with Johnny Musso, who in the early 1970s was one of Bear Bryant's finest backs.
John is a commodities trader here in Chicago, a member of the Chicago Board of Trade, and he had some interesting reminiscences about Bear Bryant.
Well, Dwayne, I think the biggest thing he did to make the players believe in him was that he first made the players believe in themselves. I know that he tested every player, and he did it usually during spring training. He really didn't want to find out if you're a quitter in the fourth quarter against Tennessee. So usually would stack all the players against you at least once in your career, or at least before he really counted on you in a game situation, to see what you did when there was a lot of adversity and when you were tired and hurting, and he just wanted to see if you'd keep going. And I remember in spring training on a hot, muggy Saturday afternoon, he stacked all the cards against the offense, and we had guys that, you know, that just couldn't go any longer and passed out. And, you know, I just remember his presence right behind the huddle, and I just didn't think I could take another step. And I found out that day that when I was so tired, I knew I couldn't take another step. I could take one more and another one and another one and another one. And as long as he was standing back there, I'd still be taking another step, as long as he's watching.
What about the Bear as a recruiter? Why was he so good at it?
Well, I'm not sure if he's is that great a recruiter or if he just does more with the people once he gets them. I know myself, when I was recruited, all the other schools said, he's an old man. Look how old he is, and he's not interested in football anymore. And gee, what was that? That was in 1968. So he has a lot of things, even back then, to overcome as far as recruiting. But most of the people he gets are in-state or at least very close to the state. And so I don't think he probably takes the cream of the crop nationwide, certainly not. But the people he gets, he just really knows how to bring out the best in them. He can size up talent very quickly. He doesn't waste time with people that can't perform. He sizes people up quickly, and then he really works with them. He's a great organizer, and he brings in, I know the staff when I was there was John David Crow was the backfield coach, and Steve Sloan was the quarterback and offensive coordinator, and Richard Williamson was the receiver coach, and Jimmy Sharp was the line coach. They were all head coaches. He had just a terrific staff for us to work with, too.
Yeah, I've heard there's some former Alabama players who developed sort of a love-hate relationship with the Bear. Did some players actually hate Bear Bryant?
A lot of them that left did. They sure did. But I think the people that stayed there for 4 years ended up all having very warm feelings for him. But he's a very strong personality. You don't walk away with neutral feelings. You either you're really drawn to him or you just can't accept that, and basically the people would quit and do something else. But there is a very intimate relationship you feel with him, but it's very strange in that it's a team feeling. When he usually addressed us, it wasn't individually, it was as a team. But we always had a meeting like Thursday night, late after we'd eat, we'd come there, and he would talk a lot. But it would be in an auditorium-type room, meeting room, and he would be addressing the team. And there was a lot of intimacy. He would talk about things very personal. And, not often about football, just about what life was like and experiences we would come up. And a lot of times he would get choked up. He would talk about things that meant a lot to him. And so there was a real intimate feeling towards him. And yet it was when you were in a group being addressed. Now, if it was he and I sitting in the office together, it would be a very hard conversation. It would not be it would be awkward, forced for me, because there was always, you were intimate in a way, and you felt very close to him, and you'd do anything for him, and yet he was always Bear Bryant, who was a legend and withdrawn and powerful. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was a motive, and I think he wanted it that way.
For another view of Coach Bear Bryant, here is Ray Perkins, an All-American at Alabama, and now the coach of the Giants. Raymond, it wasn't very difficult for Coach Bryant to recruit you, was it?
Well, as much as I really wanted to go to Alabama and play for Coach Bryant, they didn't have to recruit me very hard, Joe. I can remember only 2 schools offered me scholarships anyway, but since the time I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, I wanted to go to Alabama and play for Coach Bryant because I'd followed him for several years, and I knew that if I went there, I'd win, and if I felt like if I could play for Coach Bryant, I could play for anyone. I remember Dude Hennessy was the assistant coach at the time that saw me after one of my high school games and offered me a scholarship. And I had planned to get married and go to Alabama, and I'd already made plans to do that and hadn't even been offered a scholarship. So I told Coach Hennessy at that time, I not only wanted a scholarship, but I'd like to have a marriage scholarship. And he said, okay, and I told him that I'd like to hear from Coach Bryant. And the next week he had Coach Bryant to call, and sure enough, it was like a young kid's dream come true, really.
Raymond, your first year at Alabama was a really difficult one. Tell us, how did Coach Bryant help you during that time?
Well, Coach Bryant meant a lot to me at that time because it was a time that I needed support. I sustained a head injury and had to have a brain operation my freshman spring. And went to Birmingham, Alabama, just 50 miles away to the hospital. And he brought my wife up and got her a hotel room right beside the hospital and spent the entire 9 days there with me. And they'd come up and play cards and so forth. And that showed me a lot about the man and gave me a lot of respect for him real quick as the man and not just the coach of a football team.
Say, Ray, can you tell us what you learned from Coach Bryant that you now apply to your coaching techniques?
Well, I think, I'd have to say one word. Discipline is the first thing that would pop to my mind. I know that I wasn't as disciplined a person as far as doing anything when I first came out of high school, not nearly as much as when I came out of Alabama. And I think that he teaches that through the course of over a period of time playing football for him. I think he taught me what work will do and what the value of work will do and the discipline to do it, to get it done, and the meaning and really what means a lot to you. You know, you're going to do that and you're going to discipline yourself to do the things it takes to get it done. And the discipline part of it is just as far as teaching me, and that's what I have an appreciation for Coach Bryant for because he taught me discipline.
Now it's time to hear from Mike Hogwood of Channel 6, who is in Birmingham, Alabama. Mike has some comments on Bama's 1981 season as Coach Bryant zeroes in on number 315.
Joe, that opening game of the season was on the road, a place I'm sure you remember quite well, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They call it Death Valley, and it's the home of the LSU Bengal Tigers. And on the night of September 5th, the Alabama Crimson Tide rolled out of Baton Rouge with a big opening night victory.
Alabama was ranked in the top 5 in the nation in most of the preseason polls. In the first half of the LSU football game, they lived up to that ranking. The wishbone was working well with number 11, Ken Coley, at the controls. Coley, with his quick feet, turned the corner on the Tiger defense several times. Ken Simon, number 20, broke a long run up the middle for a touchdown. The final score of this first game of the season, Alabama 24, LSU 7.
Alabama football fans were awfully excited. The season had gotten off to a good start, and the Crimson Tide was coming home for game number 2. September 12th, right here at Legion Field, they would play the lowly Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. But on the afternoon of September 12th, disaster struck the Crimson Tide.
Alabama's offense started turning the ball over at critical times, a problem that would plague them until the Penn State game. Georgia Tech was well prepared and well coached. The big man for the Yellow Jackets was Robert Levette. He caught several key passes and scored 2 touchdowns running. One of them came late in the fourth quarter, putting Tech in front 24-21. With time running out, Alabama had a chance to tie. A 50-yard field goal attempt was just short. One of the biggest upsets of the year was in the record books. The Tide then traveled to Kentucky, where they rebounded from the loss at Legion Field. The Wildcats, though, gave them all they could handle.
one could sense there were still some problems to be ironed out, both on and off the field. Lenny Patrick, a running back, and Thomas Boyd, a linebacker, had both been suspended for breaking training regulations. Bama did pull it out 19-10. Week 4 of the season found Alabama on the road again, this time in Nashville against Vanderbilt. The Commodores fell 28-7. The Tide's record was now 3-1. But the controversy this team was to experience off the field was coming to the forefront. An article appeared in the Atlanta Constitution after the Vanderbilt game. It claimed there were morale problems and racial unrest on the team. Coach Bryant talked about it at his weekly news conference.
I hope all of them know that I'm always here and I won't keep them waiting. If they have a problem, I don't think it can be resolved through the Atlanta paper or through you or any other paper. Just one guy to come to, and that's me. I think they all know that whatever I do, I'm going to be fair. And that's what I've done, what I'm going to do. And if that's not good enough, well, it won't be done. I'll be fair and I care.
That alleged racial controversy brought Alabama together as a team. The next game was against Ole Miss in Tuscaloosa. As one observer put it, the Tide would have beaten anybody in the country on this day. The final score was 38-7. Every phase of the game belonged to the men in crimson shirts. Even more important, they were playing and pulling for one another. This had become a football team. But the pieces weren't all together yet. In Birmingham, 1 week later, Southern Mississippi was the opponent. Joe Carter turns upfield for Alabama and runs for a touchdown. But the Golden Eagles proved to America and Alabama that they were indeed deserving of a top 20 ranking. They have a great quarterback in Reggie Collier, here running 5 yards for a touchdown. With Southern Miss down 13-10 in the final minute, Collier passed his team into field goal range. With just 8 seconds left, the field goal attempt was through the uprights. The game ended in a 13-13 tie. That tie was the final disappointment of the 1981 season. The Crimson Tide reeled off 5 straight victories, 3 of them by decisive margins. The first was at Legion Field against Tennessee. Bama won it 38-19. The starting quarterback was senior Alan Gray, number 14. It was his first starting assignment of the year. Gray ran the offense to perfection. Alabama led 28-0 at halftime. The Alabama defense started showing signs of the recklessness that would help them in later wins.
It was fun. We had some fun out there today. Last week, we played well. We came in and we tied. Boy, it hurt. And this week, we got out there and the defense played well and the offense executed.
Fresh from a win over the Vols, the Tide hosted Rutgers for homecoming in Tuscaloosa. Again, a big win. 31-7 would be the final, and again, Alan Gray had the offense clicking. Bama played 3 quarterbacks all year: Gray, Ken Coley, who was hurt in midseason, and sophomore Walter Lewis, an excellent passer. Lewis connects here with Jesse Bindros for a score against the Scarlet Knights. The big wins over Tennessee and Rutgers set up what everybody knew would be a tough battle. A rematch with the Mississippi State Bulldogs, a team that had upset them a year earlier. This year, the game was in Tuscaloosa. The Bulldogs jumped out to an early lead, but it wasn't long before Alabama's offense got cranked up as well. In this game, the bounce of the football was decidedly in favor of the Crimson Tide. This game was an emotional one for the Tide defense. Bama leads it 13-10. We're in the final minutes. State's John Bond hits Danny Knight with a pass. The ball is down at the Alabama 9-yard line. 2 plays later, Bond to pass. Eddie Lowe tips the ball. All-American safety Tommy Wilcox comes up with an interception. Alabama wins it. Their record is 7-1-1.
We're back in Mizlou Network control. It was November 14th, 1981. Penn State, Alabama. Now let's go to Mike Hogwood for win number 314.
The game with the Nittany Lions was in State College. The second week in a row, Alabama would play a team in the nation's top 10. This Crimson Tide team had saved their best performance of the year for this game. Walter Lewis was the star of the day. He threw 2 touchdown passes to Jesse Bindros. His most spectacular pass set up a field goal. It was a 57-yard bomb to the fastest man on the team, number 4, Joey Jones. This was a day for the defense, too. Early third quarter, Penn State inside the Bama 5. Because of a penalty, the Nittany Lions had 7 chances to score. The Bama defense refused to budge. The final score of the football game, 31-16. For Coach Paul Bryant, it was career win number 314, tying him with Amos Alonzo Stagg. Coach Bryant had tied the record. Only one more victory needed to become the winningest college football coach in history. The first opportunity would come against Auburn, Alabama's fiercest rival. The date was November 28th. Auburn, coached by an ex-Bear Bryant assistant, Pat Dye. The stage was set. And on November 28th, college football history was made here at Legion Field. Pat and the Bear, the legend and the protege. One going for the ultimate victory, the other looking for a milestone in his young career. Chuck Clanton, a sophomore from Florida, provided almost instant excitement for Auburn, returning the first punt of the game, 44 yards down to the Alabama 13. The Tigers, unfortunately, came away empty after a missed short field goal attempt. On the Tide's second possession, senior Allen Gray finds a crease in the defense and rips off 63 yards to the Auburn 21. 3 plays later, Allen would cross the plane of the goal line, and the Tide had the first points of the game at 7:47 of the first quarter. Peter Kim's placement made it 7-0. Auburn started a drive at its own 30 late in the first quarter, only to have it halted 10 plays later when Ken Hobby's pass to Ed West was intercepted at the goal line by Tommy Wilcox. The biggest play for Auburn came late in the second quarter when George Peoples, who gained 155 yards on 26 carries, gets a large share of it on this 63-yard jaunt to the end zone. Al Del Greco's extra point tied the game at 7. On the next series, Allen Gray fumbles. Auburn recovers, first and goal at the 10. But again, the Tigers' field goal attempt on 4th down was no good. Quarterback Ken Coley came on for the Tide in the third quarter. On Alabama's first series, he began a drive on his own 45 and ended it with a shovel pass to Jesse Vindros. Vindros gets a great block in the secondary and puts Bama ahead with a 26-yard touchdown run. 14-7 Alabama. The Tide held Auburn on the next series, but Joey Jones was unable to handle Alan Bollinger's punt, and Chuck Clanton recovered for Pat Dye's team at the 2-yard line. This time, Auburn would not be denied. Lionel Little Train James scored his team's second touchdown with a 2-yard sweep. This game was tied at 14. With just 34 seconds gone in the fourth quarter, Del Greco kicked his only field goal of the day, this from 19 yards away. And Auburn shocked the crowd and a national TV audience by pulling ahead 17-14. The rest of the game belonged to Alabama, though. The next time the Tide had the football, Walter Lewis was at the controls. Walter guided the team 75 yards in 7 plays, culminating with a perfect touchdown pass to the sure-handed Jesse Vindros. With the extra point kick, Alabama was back on top, 17-14. Then it was time to highlight Lenny Patrick. The sophomore from Jasper tore through the Auburn defense for a 15-yard touchdown midway through the final quarter. The final score, 28-17. For Paul William Bear Bryant, victory number 315 had been achieved.
The record that the players set today, I'm thankful to the good Lord for permitting me to be associated with the many wonderful people at Maryland, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Alabama.
And thank you, Coach, for providing your players with the guidance and leadership that has produced many, many victories. Now let's go to Joe Willie Namath, who's standing by with one of your more famous disciples.
Danny Ford, coach of Clemson's national champions. Well, he's another one of Bear's boys who made good in a big way. Danny, tell us, did Coach Bryant give you any advice about coaching?
Joe, he told us that if there's any way possible not to go into coaching, if you could do without it, if you could live without it, because you weren't never going to make much money, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of time from your family. And he said the only way that you need to go into coaching is if that you cannot live without it. So I guess the people that go into coaching or that have been around Coach Bryant can't live without being around football or athletics.
Danny, would you consider succeeding Coach Bryant at Alabama?
Coach Bryant was thinking about retiring when I was playing, or at one time when we were 6-5 team, he was trying to find somebody to take his place, and he tried to get Royal and McKay and those kind of people, and he never could find anybody that was good enough to take his place. So I know that he's going to have a hard time finding anybody else that's good enough to take his place when he retires. I hope that he doesn't ever have to retire, because I hope he stays in it for a long, long time, because he can help so many youngsters
and has been able to help so many youngsters. But it'll be a tough job for whoever that would try to take his place, because I don't believe one man can do it.
We're back in Mizlou Network control. Let's go to Mike Hogwood in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who had an opportunity to spend some time with Coach Bryant. Mike, how do you suppose the coach feels about having the pressure of 315 off his back?
How does it feel to have that 315 off your back?
Well, I haven't seen anything about that. I think that's, as far as Coach Stagg, it's a different deal. He still has his record. He should have it, just like Babe Ruth, or whatever you want to put it. Because time was different, areas were different. We have large staff, we have big budgets, and so on and so forth. I'm glad it's behind us, and I say that's because our team, all our team did was break their own record. And I hope they break it September 11th again. But that's behind, and because you the first man I've seen in one of those things 2 months.
I guess you get excited each year. You've been doing it so long. But does each year give you the excitement as it always does in the previous year?
Well, the association with coaches and the players, and game day, and the music, and pressure, and, you like that, really. But as far as just getting excited over football, I don't anymore as much as I used to, and because there's a lot of other things in life that I've missed, I guess. I'd like to do a few of those before I die.
So that's it. Mizlou's look at the man, Bryant, the Coach Bryant. His moments, his magic. It all adds up to a truly great coach and a great person who has brought so much to football. Thank you, Coach. Thank you, Howard, for sharing this hour with me. I enjoyed it, buddy. That's what life's about.